Hi, my name is Mirka Jambuti, and I'm part of BookOrators, a global student organization that aims to instill a love for literature in youth. As part of our guest speaker series, we are joined by Rin Chupeco, author of the best-selling Bone Witch series and multiple other science fiction and fantasy novels. We have reached out to them today because we wanted to share the experiences of Rin Chupeco and their journey to becoming a best-selling author. We are so excited to have you here today to talk to us and our viewers. Ms. Chupeco, for our first question, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and elaborate on your background, such as what attracted you to becoming an author?
So I live in the Philippines. I have lived in the Philippines my whole life, and I am still living in the Philippines. So one of the biggest questions I get asked, the most common question I get asked is, how are you able to publish in the United States? How did you get a literary agent in the United States? How did you get a publisher in the United States while still living in the Philippines? And my answer is always, I did what everybody else did, which was to write a book and email agents if they were interested in them. And fortunately, a few were interested, and that's how I got my agent. So, basically, I do want to say, like, right at the start of this session, that you can do it. Like, you can do writing anywhere. You can be a writer regardless of where you live, as long as you have a book that's compelling enough for people to want to read more. I'm non-binary, so my pronouns are they, them, and I am something of an anomaly here in the Philippines, I guess, because the Philippines is a very conservative, traditional, religious country. We are the only Catholic country, and well, actually, we are the only country that still considers divorce illegal. I think that it was just really me. Like, regardless of where I was gonna live, where I would grow up in, I think I was always gonna want to be a writer. I mean, growing up, writing, being an author was the first profession that I ever considered. And I was, like, when I was 6 years old, the first adult book I read was Stephen King's Pet Sematary. And that was mostly because I thought it was about a pet cat, because the cover had a very odd looking cat. And I thought, oh, cool, book about cats. And then I read it, and it was not about just cats. And, but I really love ghost stories. I love growing up, ghost stories were my favorite, absolutely. And I guess I've always surrounded myself with books. Like, I've started reading when I was like 2 or 3 years old. I know that's pretty early, but I really got addicted to books at an early age. And I tend to be a shut-in. Like, I tend to be very introverted, and I rather surround myself with books. So I'm alone most of the time when I was growing up, but I was never lonely, because I had books as like companions. So with that sort of mindset growing up, I guess it was inevitable that I would want to be an author myself and push really hard to do that. Well, for the most part, actually, I was a lone wolf going into it. Like, when I first started writing, I started seriously considering trying to get an agent, trying to get published. I do not make the same mistakes that I did. Like, I lucked out. But I think also that it would be very advantageous for new writers to start working or like critiquing other like-minded writers, like find friends with other writers, and grow and develop your writing craft together. And there is one story that I like to tell often, because here in the Philippines, writing is not considered a career at all, because every writer here, from like reporters to people working for magazines to people trying to indie publish, you always need like a second or even a third job just to support your writing. In fact, in most cases, writing doesn't even make money at all, and you have to work a different job to support your ability to keep writing. And it's very, very hard because in the Philippines, fiction and writing is not really considered like essential. It's not considered essential. Even if you're a journalist working for a prestigious newspaper, it is very hard to make a living just through that. And I was very disheartened at the start. Like, people were always telling me, no, don't go into writing. You'll never earn anything from it. It's gonna be hard on you. And I, you know, it came to the point though where there was this very, very famous author who, for some reason, took a liking to Filipinos and the Philippines, and he announced that, hey, I want to sponsor a writing contest, like a short story writing contest and a graphic novel writing contest. And I want all of you to take part and see, and I'm going to award huge cash prizes. And so on the lark, I decided, what the hell? Why not? Right? So I sent in my work, and I was one of the winners of a short story. I was one of the winners for that contest. And part of the prize was he invited all of us to dinner so that we could pick his brain and we could ask him questions and talk about anything, basically. And the question that I asked him was, it's so disheartening because here in the Philippines, there's so many like people telling me you shouldn't be doing this because it doesn't make any money at all. So what would your advice be when faced with like obstacles like that? And then he just looked at me, and he looked at the rest of us as well, everybody, and he said, you know what, bollocks to that. If you're a writer, you're gonna write, so write. And I really took that to heart, and that was sort of that push that I needed to start making my own stories and looking for agents. And fortunately I was successful at it. And the author is Neil Gaiman. So it was, a huge ego booster, huge confidence booster. And I think that was the final push I needed to be able to go and be a writer myself. And I will always be grateful to him for that. Well, actually, the first book that I finished writing, where I put it out for querying, wasn't actually the first book that got published. The first book that I actually wrote and finished was this book called Firekeeper. And I couldn't get most agents interested in that because there were like 3 agents who reached out and were interested in it. But the requirement was that this was way back in like 2011, 2000, or late 2010. So the culture has sort of shifted since then. But back then, agents were asking me to change my character into a white character when the main character was Filipino. And I came so close to actually doing that, like changing it, because I was that desperate to, like, I want an agent right now. Like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to have to change anything more. But at the last minute, I decided, you know what, I'll just start another book, and then let's see where that goes. But I don't want to change any part of that first book that defined it, because it was a very Filipino book to me. And I don't want to change anything at all about it, because if I made it a white character, every part of that book becomes sort of meaningless. Like, what's the point of the book anyway? I have to change so many things because the cultural aspects of it is so ingrained into the book. And so I started writing another book, and I got more success with that one. And that's the book that got me my agent, which was The Girl from the Well, which is a horror book. And that Firekeeper book actually found traction in 2017 because my publisher reached out and asked me, hey, you got any more like books you want to pitch to us? And I pitched that, and they liked it. And eventually that book changed its title, and it became Wicked as You Wish. So, the course of publishing is never a straight line. Sometimes you take detours, sometimes you go you go revisit the same places multiple times, hoping to find something there. But I guess perseverance is really the key when you want to go look for agents and you want to be traditionally published. So don't give up. Like, that's all I can say, because I've seen how that worked for me. Well, my ideal environment used to be like small restaurants and cafes, but right now I can't do that. I can't do any of that. So I've had to change my writing habits as well to go with how, how everything that's been happening right now. So sometimes I wake up earlier in the morning just so I could write before my kids wake up and dive bomb on me. And or sometimes I ask, because I live with my mother-in-law as well. We're all in one house, so I ask her occasionally to look after the kids for a couple of hours, just enough for me to get like a couple of thousand words done, hopefully, for the day. And it's a lot of adjustment, but I think that if you really want to write, you're gonna find a way, regardless of your previous writing habits. And I've also found that when I write books, every writing process for every book isn't always the same. Like, I wrote The Girl from the Well very, very quickly. It's like 2 months and I was done, and very, very like relaxed, because I didn't push myself to write like too many words a day. And I didn't have a lot of revisions for it. I didn't have a lot of edits. But when it came to The Bone Witch, for example, I started writing The Bone Witch right after I had my first kid. And I took advantage of all those sleepless nights to start writing. And I could tell you, like, maybe 40% of the book I don't remember writing them, because I was so tired. But I was like, I needed to stay awake because I had to change diapers, and it was so hard for me to fall back to sleep. By the time I go back to sleep, my kid is already awake, so I have to do something to while away the time, and that's when I found writing. But I couldn't tell you how I wrote part of it, because I don't actually remember, because I was too tired. But I think what saved me there was starting to make outlines. Like, I never did that with The Girl from the Well, but with The Bone Witch, I focused on outlines. I focused on like drawing my maps first before I actually started writing everything down. And it worked with that particular book, which might not have necessarily worked with The Girl from the Well. And then when I started writing The Never Tilting World, it was similar to that. But when Wicked As You Wish came, when I started rewriting it again for the publication for 2020, I sort of started doing that randomly generated chapters and scenes instead of really focusing on outline, because I was focusing more on the characters, their banter, like their snark, their character development, more than I was focusing on the plot. And I think that's what I wanna impart as well. Like, every book's gonna be different. Every writing process behind every book might be different to you, and that doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. In fact, the fact that that this particular book has a different writing process from others that you've written means that you're probably doing something right, because you know how to approach your book and write the way you think would make the book the best it is. Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't usually get writer's block. That's the opposite of what I've experienced compared to what I've heard other writers say. I don't get writer's block because I have like 800 ideas all working in my head all at the same time. And the problem isn't that I don't have any ideas. The problem is that I'm only one person and I can't write them all down in my lifetime, I think. Because I constantly have new ideas coming in, even as I'm writing another book. and it's hard sometimes to not switch to that new idea and disregard the current book that I'm writing that I have already been paid for. So I feel like when you get ideas, the best way for me to sort of flesh them out further and develop the concepts behind them easier is when I go, when I relax. Like when I'm at my most relaxed, when I'm not really thinking too much about things, that's when I get most of the ideas that I do get. And if you want to jumpstart something like that, in my case, I usually go for like long walks. Like I just go wherever and then let my mind wander. And, just thinking randomly about things sort of generates new ideas for me. I know that might not always be the case for other writers, but though I've found that the number one cause for writer's block is stress. Like if you're too worried that you're not gonna write, it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you tend not to write even further because you already think that you can't write. So I would say, be kind to yourself. Go and treat yourself out to a nice drink, or go watch something that you like for an hour or so, and then come back to the work. And then you'll find that you'll have more ideas, at least more ideas of how to put them into practice in your book than when you've spent all that time worrying about your book and writing and constantly stressing yourself out. So, give yourself a break. Pretty much all the books actually were based on some kind of experience that I've had, that I've learned to turn into a book. Like The Girl from the Well was when I was working at this office with a very, very old building. Like the elevators were noisy, the lights were like flickering on and off. And when I worked at an office on the 7th floor, I think, and the 8th floor had a company full of Japanese salarymen who were working there. And I worked overtime a lot, and they worked overtime a lot. So so sometimes when they go home at the same time I do, they get into the elevator first and then they go down. I look like an Asian ghost. Like I have long black hair. I love wearing dark clothes. I am very pale. And so, when they're on the elevator and they stop at my floor and the doors slowly open, and I like to text when I am waiting for the elevator. So my head's down, and while I'm texting, so the hair tends to fall over my face, and they open the elevator doors and they see me standing there and they start screaming, and I don't know why they're screaming, so I start screaming right back, right? And we're screaming at each other for a few more seconds until they're like, "Oh, you're not a ghost," and "Oh, you're not a mass murderer." So, and it happened so many times to I think it happened to 3 or 4 different people in that company. And it came to the point where they got used to me, so that every time they see me, they started calling me Sadako-chan. And Sadako is the name of the ghost from The Ring. So that was my pet. That was their pet name for me, Sadako-chan. And all that sort of started inspiring me to write a ghost as a protagonist in a book, because that's what they keep mistaking me for. So it's the little things like that the funny things that I take from my own experiences and then I put them into my book. So, consequently, The Never Tilting World, for example, is very much about climate change, the destruction that climate can cause if you're not a good steward for your world. And that was inspired because I got stuck in an island resort for 3 days without electricity, without access to drinkable water during one of the worst monsoons here in the Philippines. It absolutely destroyed all the surrounding areas of that island. And that sort of inspired the Never Tilting World. What if you lived in a world and you can't get out of it? And this is the only thing because for those 3 days that was the only thing I knew. And I was also pregnant then, which kind of leveled the worry and the fear up to 11. So that's always been a bit hard for me. Like on average, I take maybe a month to do most of the preliminary research for the book before I actually start writing it, because I consider myself a plantser, which is a hybrid of a planner and a pantser. So the planners basically outline everything from start to finish before they even write the book. Then the pantsers just make it up as they go along. And the planter is like the combination of both of them. And in my case, it sort of comes out as me plotting everything until the halfway mark of the book. What I would think would be the halfway mark of the book. And then I just start writing the first half of the book using that first half of the outline. And sometimes when I get to the halfway point, my chapters do not look the same as the outline that I came up with in the first place. So at the halfway mark, I reassess the outline and I start writing a new outline based on what I actually did. And then I write down the rest. And people usually ask, well, why do you even write the outline in the first place? And I say, well, I need a structure. I need like a roadmap to sort of navigate my way through the rest of the book. And if I start stopping, I go on detours and visit new landmarks, that's okay, as long as I'm still sticking to the basic. Well, obviously, I'm going to say Neil Gaiman first to start with, because I really love, aside from being an inspiration, I really love their works. The Sandman pretty much blew my mind when it came to what kind of media you could put out and how you convey that media in so many innovative and different ways. And it opened my mind to experimentations and experimenting with my own writing styles, my own writing techniques. So I feel like that's something that writers should learn very early on in their careers, how they want the writing to come off to other readers and how comfortable they want to be with their writing style. And I guess the second, growing up, I'm trying to think of books that I've read growing up that really inspired me as a writer. And I'm going to say, Neil Gaiman made me want to be a better writer, but the Discworld series and Terry Pratchett made me want to be a better person. And I think that's a really good book to make someone feel like they want to be that, be somebody better. And Discworld is really a satire, but it's such a good way to look at the world, like how the politics and the interplay between people, just normal people, and how good people can seem like bad people, and how bad people do the right things for the wrong reasons. His books are always so compelling, and that kind of depth is something something that I want to showcase in my own books as well. And he is somebody I have looked up to for so many years now. Like, this will really change my mind for a really long time. And I mean, for like the last one, I think, is, I'm not sure if this book is available outside of the Philippines, but it's popular in the Philippines. It's this book called Smaller and Smaller Circles, and it's by F.H. Batacan. And it's basically a murder mystery where two Jesuit priests investigate a murder and a series of murders in Manila. They're trying to hunt down a serial killer. And that was so unique here in the Philippines and back when it was published, just because the concept of, hard-boiled commercial fiction making a lot of traction here, that is something I've never seen before, and it's so uniquely Filipino. It sort of combines the religious fervor sometimes here in the country with, you know, all the injustices that happen here as well, and and FH Batacan meshes it so well together. It's like watching a police procedural on TV. That's how good it is, and it really inspired me to write more hard hitting issues like that closer to home. And yeah, I know I don't think it's gonna be available for a lot of people outside of the Philippines, but when you can get it, that's something I really really recommend.
Yeah, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. And I'm sure our viewers enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And so stay on the lookout for the next installment of our speaker series. And remember to check out our website, BookOrators.org, and follow our Facebook and Instagram at BookOrators.